The rust never slept. It was the first lesson every child of the remnant learned, a catechism whispered in the recycled air of the great arcs that became their only home. Rust was entropy, the slow, grinding decay of the galaxy's promises, the reddish-brown ghost of a war that had ended 70 years ago, but had never truly been won. For Warden Kalen, the rust was more than a metaphor. It was the taste in her water, the faint metallic scent on her uniform, the silent predator that gnawed at the outer hull of Aegis Station, humanity's last bastion and its most gilded cage. She stood on the observation deck, a ghost in the starlight, her reflection a pale mask superimposed over the swirling dust of the Seraphina Nebula. Below her, the station's inner rings spun in majestic silence, a city of 10 million souls clinging to a rock that was also a fortress, a tomb, and a weapon. Her job was to oversee the last of those functions. She was the warden of the vault, the keeper of humanity's sins, the woman who held the keys to the weapons that the Concordance, the galaxy's self-appointed peacemakers, had forced them to renounce in the armistice. The Concordance spoke of a new era of peace, of shared prosperity, of healing the scars left by the scouring, the war against the crystalline silicates. Kalen knew better. Peace was just the quiet part of war, the intake of breath before the scream. Her world, the colony of New Avalon, had been one of those scars, a world of green hills and silver rivers, sacrificed on the altar of strategic delay while the Concordance fleets observed from a safe distance, documenting the efficiency of silicate glassing beams as they turned soil and bone into a smooth, obsidian mirror. They sent condolences after, of course, etched on elegant data slates and delivered by silver-robed emissaries who couldn't meet her eyes. They offered humanity a place in their new order, a junior partnership for a species that had proven so regrettably resilient. Humanity had accepted because the alternative was extinction. But they had not forgotten. They had built Aegis. They had signed the treaties limiting their fleets and forbidding the development of Singularity-class warheads or mimetic plagues. And then they had built the Vault. And Kalen, a survivor with eyes the color of a dead star, had become its warden. An alert chimed softly in her ear, a sound so subtle it was more a premonition than an interruption, a priority one summons from the High Council. She didn't turn from the star-dusted window. They didn't call the warden unless something had gone deeply, fundamentally wrong. She ran a hand over the shaved side of her head, the callous skin of her palm rasping against the stubble, a nervous habit she'd never broken. The council chamber was a sterile amphitheater of white marble and cold light, designed to intimidate and impress. It did neither to Kalen. She strode to the center of the floor, her black warden's uniform absorbing the light, a stark contrast to the cream and gold robes of the council members. High Elder Theron, a man whose family had bought their way off Earth before the scouring even began, stood to address her, his face a practiced mask of gravitas. "Warden," he began, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "An anomaly has been detected, a signal of human origin." He gestured, and a holographic display shimmered into existence between them. It showed a chaotic, swirling mass of wreckage, the ghostly remnants of shattered starships, the Kepler Belt, the graveyard of the final battle of the Scouring, a forbidden zone, a tomb so vast and radioactive that the Concordance had declared it a permanent quarantine zone under penalty of total sanctions. "The signal is archaic," Theron continued. a pre-scouring emergency beacon. Our archivists have identified it. It belongs to the Venture, a colony ship that vanished 90 years ago on the Daedalus Traverse. It was presumed lost to a stellar phenomenon. It would seem that presumption was incorrect. Kaylin stared at the display, her mind racing. The Venture was a legend, a ghost story told to children about one of humanity's first great leaps to the stars, a ship carrying 50,000 colonists into the unknown. To find it now, after all this time, was impossible. To find it in the heart of the Kepler belt was a sacrilege. Its location is problematic, Theron said, with masterful understatement. It lies deep within the belt, in a sector patrolled by Concordance drones. Any unsanctioned entry would be a direct violation of the Armistice Accords. A woman on the council, diplomat Eva Rostova, spoke up, her voice smooth and placating. We have already dispatched a formal request to the Concordance, petitioning for a joint recovery mission. It is a delicate matter, but with the proper diplomatic channels, we are hopeful for a peaceful resolution. Kaylin's lips thinned into a bloodless line. Hope. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. She remembered hoping as a child on New Avalon, watching the sky for the telltale silver streaks of Concordance ships that never came. They will deny the request, she said, her voice a low rasp that cut through the chamber's perfect acoustics. They will cite the instability of the region, the radiological hazards, the sanctity of the war grave. They will form a committee which will convene for a decade, and by the time they grant us permission to search, there will be nothing left but dust. General Maddox, the grim-faced head of the Aegis Defense Fleet, nodded in agreement. The warden is right. This is a test. They want to see if we still have a spine. Theron sighed, a sound of pure political exhaustion. And what would you have us do? General send in a fleet. Break the treaty that has kept us alive for 70 years and invite the very annihilation we fought to avoid. It was then that Kaylin spoke again, her voice resonating with an authority that had nothing to do with her rank and everything to do with the ghosts she carried. We are not talking about a fleet. The harrowing doctrine is clear. In the event of a potential loss of human life, due to Concordance inaction or malfeasance, the warden is authorized to take necessary, limited, and clandestine action. 50,000 human souls, elder, even if it's only their bodies, they are ours. We do not leave our dead to be picked apart by alien archivists or left to rot in a forbidden zone as a political statement. The harrowing doctrine. The name itself was a secret, a heresy spoken only in the highest echelons of power. It was the codicil to the armistice, the secret promise humanity had made to itself never again. It gave Kaylin, as warden of the vault, the unilateral authority to deploy humanity's hidden teeth. Theron's face paled. You would invoke the doctrine for a ghost ship, for a signal that could be a malfunction. Or worse, a trap I would, Kaylin said, her gaze unwavering. You will not send a fleet. General, you will not file another petition. Diplomat, you will do nothing. This falls under my authority. She turned without waiting for dismissal, her boots echoing on the marble. The council was a body of debate. She was an instrument of action. In the cold, sterile depths of Aegis Station, far below the spinning rings of civilian life, lay the vault. The air was frigid, smelling of ozone and dormant power. Here, humanity's forbidden children slept, not just warheads, but things far more subtle and terrifying. AI constructs with no ethical subroutines, cloaking technologies that bent reality, mimetic agents that could rewrite an enemy's will to fight. Kaylin walked past them all, her destination a small, unassuming hangar at the vault's heart. Inside sat a single ship, the Charon. It was a Revenant-class scout vessel, more shadow than machine, its hull coated in sensor-nullifying polymers that made it a ghost to all but the most sophisticated quantum scan. Its crew was already waiting, 5 figures clad in matte black vacuum suits, their faces obscured by polarized helmets. They were the Reclaimed, soldiers officially listed as killed in action, their identities erased, their loyalty sworn only to the Warden and the Doctrine. They were specters, chosen for their skills and their shared understanding that some missions were more important than survival. Kaylin didn't give a speech. She didn't need to. She simply boarded the Quran, taking her place in the command chair that felt more like a throne of bones than a pilot's seat. The ship detached from its moorings with a whisper, sliding out of a hidden launch bay and into the void. It engaged its stealth drive, and to any observer on Aegis, it was as if the ship had simply ceased to exist. Their journey to the Kepler belt was a silent vigil through the dark. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's recycler and the faint, rhythmic ping of the Venture's distress beacon, a lonely heartbeat in the abyss. As they approached the edge of the belt, the true scale of the war's end became horribly apparent. It wasn't a field of debris, it was a reef of cosmic death. The shattered husks of capital ships, some kilometers long, drifted in silent ballets of destruction. Human dreadnoughts and silicate biovessels were tangled together, fused by the heat of their final, agonizing moments. Clouds of ionized gas pulsed with lethal radiation and gravitational eddies, created by the detonation of dozens of singularity drives, threatened to tear the Charon apart. Kaylin piloted the ship herself, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes scanning the holographic display that translated the chaos into navigable data. She threaded the needle through the wreckage, her knuckles white but her breathing even. This was her penance, navigating the ghosts of the war that had made her. They had been in the belt for 6 hours when the ship's passive sensors picked up an anomaly. Energy readings, whispered her sensor tech, a man known only as Weaver. Inconsistent with background radiation. It's localized. And it's patterned. Kaylin brought the ship to a crawl, hiding it in the shadow of a derelict human cruiser whose spine had been snapped in two. On screen, the forward view resolved, zooming in on a point deep within the densest part of the wreckage. The Venture's signal was coming from there, a steady but insistent pulse, but the source was wrong, terribly wrong. It wasn't a human colony ship. It was a silicate Hive-Mother, one of the largest and most feared vessels of the Scouring, a behemoth of crystalline latticework and biological horror. It was dead, its outer shell scarred and fractured from countless weapons impacts. But the energy ratings Weaver had detected were real. A faint, rhythmic glow emanating from deep within its shattered core. And the human distress beacon, the 90-year-old cry for help from a ship full of colonists, was screaming from the heart of the alien monster. Weaver's voice was barely audible. "Warden, that's impossible." Kaylin stared at the silent, monstrous tomb, 100 questions igniting in her mind. Was this a trap allure set by the Concordance to expose their secret capabilities, or was it something else, something far older and more terrifying? She thought of the 50,000 souls of the venture, and the millions more on New Avalon. She thought of the rust, and the promises of politicians, and the quiet graves of heroes forgotten by treaty. Her duty was to the vault, to the weapons, but her oath, the one she had sworn to herself in the ruins of her home, was to the lost. "Take us in closer, Weaver," she commanded, her voice as cold and hard as the void outside. "I want to see what kind of ghosts are haunting that ship." The Karin moved forward, a sliver of shadow slipping into the dead heart of a monster, chasing the echo of a song that should have ended almost a century ago. The rust never slept, and neither did the dead. The interior of the Hive-Mother was a cathedral of silent horror. The Hurones, cutting lasers, had sliced open an entry point through a fractured crystalline plate, peeling it back like the lid of a sarcophagus. Kalen led the 4-person excursion team, leaving Weaver to command the ship and act as their eyes in the void. As she drifted through the breach, the first thing that struck her was the silence. It was a pressure, a physical weight on the ears that was deeper than the simple absence of sound in a vacuum. It was the silence of a billion lives extinguished in an instant. The architecture was a nightmare of geometry and biology. Crystalline spars, iridescent even in the low light of their helmet lamps, grew out of what looked like dried, leathery membrane stretched over a skeletal framework of impossible size. The floor, walls, and ceiling were indistinguishable, a chaotic lattice of alien design. Dust motes, fine as powdered bone and glinting like mica, swirled in the beam of her light. She recognized it from post-glassing analysis on New Avalon desiccated cellular material. They were floating through the powdered remains of the ship's crew. One of her reclaimed, a heavy weapons specialist named Jorik, grunted over the private comm. "Feels wrong being in here." "Warden." Kalen didn't reply. Of course it felt wrong. It was a violation. They were trespassers in the tomb of their greatest enemy, and every shadow seemed to hold a lingering trace of hatred. Her HUD painted a faint green line through the chaos, a directional arrow pointing toward the beacon's source, still several kilometers deeper within the behemoth. "Magnetize boots," she ordered, her voice flat and calm. Standard ghost formation, eyes open for structural weakness and residual biosignatures. We move slow and we move quiet. With a series of soft clicks, their boots anchored them to a relatively stable crystalline plate, giving them the semblance of walking in a gravityless hell. They moved with the practiced economy of motion that defined the reclaimed, weapons held at a low ready, sweeping their sectors. The only sounds were the soft scrape of their magnetic soles and the controlled hiss of their suit recyclers. They descended through what might have been a primary conduit, a tunnel wide enough to fly a frigate through, lined with dormant, pulsating sacs that now hung like shriveled fruit. As they passed one, Kalen's proximity sensor flared with a faint energy reading. She motioned for a halt, her fist clenched in a silent command. She approached the sack, her rifle raised, and illuminated it with her main beam. It was translucent, and inside, she could see a curled, insectoid shape, something like a scorpion the size of a man. Its chitinous plates, a milky white, dormant or dead. "It's a scion," breathed another reclaimed, Lyra, the team's tech specialist, a drone soldier. They gestated in these things by the thousand. Kaylin felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She remembered the Scions. They had swarmed the defense lines on New Avalon, a tide of clicking, screaming death. To see one like this, inert and still, was unnerving in a way a live one had never been. She backed away slowly. It's drained. All of them are. The Hive-Mother must have pulled all residual energy back to its core when it died. They continued their descent. The beacon growing stronger. It's steady. Rhythmic pulse, a strangely human sound in this alien mausoleum. The path narrowed, forcing them into a series of smaller, interconnected chambers that felt more organic, like the ventricles of a gargantuan heart. Here, the crystalline structures were less prominent, replaced by ribbed arches of bone-like material and walls of fibrous, petrified tissue. It was here that their luck ran out. As they entered a vast, spherical chamber, their suit lights caught movement, a skittering sound. Metal on crystal echoed through their helmet audio pickups. Jorix swore, bringing his heavy pulse rifle to bear. Contact multiple contacts, dozens of smaller scions, no bigger than dogs, poured from crevices in the walls. They were different from the one in the sack skeletal, stripped of their bioflesh, their forms pure, metallic endoskeletons. Their optical sensors glowed with a feral red light. They weren't alive, not in a biological sense. They were automatons, running on the last dregs of the Hive-Mother's dying power, its final immune response to the infection of their presence. They're just scavengers. Lyra reported, her voice tight as she fired a precise burst from her carbine, shattering one of the advancing machines. Minimal armor, basic command protocols. Doesn't matter what they are, Kaylin said, her own rifle barking. A flash of plasma vaporizing another automaton's head. Clear path. Do not let them box us in. The fight was a silent, deadly dance in zero gravity. The reclaimed were brutally efficient. They used the chamber's chaotic geometry to their advantage, pushing off walls, firing, and seeking new cover. Plasma bolts lit the darkness in strobing flashes, impacting on crystal and metal with silent detonations. The automatons were relentless, driven by a simple, ancient directive: purge the foreign organisms. But they were old, their movements jerky, their power sources failing. One by one, they were dismantled, their red eyes extinguished, their metallic bodies left to drift in the silent chamber. The engagement lasted less than 2 minutes. When it was over, Kaylin did a quick status check. No injuries, minimal energy expenditure, but the illusion of safety was shattered. The Hive-Mother was not entirely dead. It had ghosts, and its ghosts had teeth. Weaver, you see that Kaylin asked, her breathing controlled. Affirmative. Warden, his voice crackled back, tinny with distance. A localized power surge activated those drones. The source seems to be along your current path, co-located with the beacon. So whatever is powering the beacon woke them up, Kaylin mused. Or they're guarding it. They pushed on, moving with renewed urgency. The beacon was now so strong it was an audible hum over their comms, a desperate, lonely sound that echoed in the marrow of her bones. They finally emerged from the warren of tunnels into the ship's central core. The sight stole the breath from her lungs. It was a cavern of impossible scale, a hollow sphere at the heart of the Hive-Mother. In the center, suspended by a web of thick, organic cables and crystalline filaments, was a sight that defied all logic. It was the entire forward section of a human starship. The bridge, the forward crew quarters, the main sensor array, all of it sheared from its body and held in the heart of the alien vessel like a fly in amber. The hull was scarred, pitted with weapons fire, but the name was still faintly visible beneath decades of cosmic dust, illuminated by the flashing light of its own beacon venture. By the stars, Jorik whispered, the profanity sounding like a prayer. It was here. It was real. The silicates hadn't just destroyed it, they had taken a piece of it, a trophy, and embedded it into the core of their ship. Why Kalen's mind, always running on tactics and threats, could find no strategic reason for it. It was an act of something else, possession, curiosity, a sentiment utterly alien to the mindless destroyers she had fought. Lyra, can you get a scan of the interior? Kalen asked, her voice tight. Life signs. Anything. Lyra worked for a moment, her helmet tilted down as she manipulated the controls on her wrist. Negative. Warden. 0 life signs. High levels of residual radiation. But the hull is surprisingly intact. Power is still running to that beacon on a closed loop. Looks like it's been jury-rigged to a silicate energy conduit. One of the thick cables pulsed with a faint, sickly yellow light, feeding power to the human ship's dying cry. We're going in, Kalen declared. Jorik, cover the entrance, the rest of you, with me. They used their maneuvering jets to cross the void of the central chamber, landing softly on the Venture's hull. Kalen found the emergency airlock, its manual release fused shut. It took a plasma torch and several tense minutes to slice it open. As the tortured metal finally gave way, they entered the ship. Inside, it was a time capsule. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Floating in the zero gravity of the corridors were the dead, their bodies perfectly preserved in the cold vacuum, their faces frozen in expressions of surprise or resignation, not terror. There were no signs of a fight, no weapons discharged, no bodies bearing the telltale marks of silicate weaponry. They had just died. Kalen and her team moved silently towards the bridge, their lights cutting through the gloom. They floated past personal terminals left mid-sentence, past family photos pinned to bulkheads, past a child's zero-G ball hanging motionless in the air. It was an orderly grave, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. On the bridge, they found the command crew still strapped into their chairs. The captain, a woman with silver hair and a stern, weathered face, was slumped over her console, her hand still resting near the distress signal activation switch. The main view screen was cracked, but through the fracture, Kalen could see the swirling, organic inner wall of the Hive-Mother's core chamber. It was as if they had died looking into the very soul of their captor. Warden, Lyra said, her voice hushed. The ship's log. The core memory is intact, and it's active. Kalen moved to the captain's console. The screen was dark, but a single prompt blinked in the center, written in an archaic human coding language. Access log final entry. She hesitated for only a second, then placed her gloved hand on the activation panel. The screen flickered to life, and the captain's face appeared, recorded 90 years ago. She looked tired, her uniform disheveled, but her eyes held a strange, feverish light. There was no panic in her voice. This is Captain Eva Rostova of the colony ship Venture. she began, her voice strained but clear. "We did not encounter a stellar phenomenon. We encountered them, the silicates. But they did not attack. They sang to us." The video wavered, filled with static. It was a song of crystal and light, a frequency that resonated not in our ears, but in our minds. They showed us everything: the birth of stars, the shape of galaxies. They spoke of a different path, not conquest, integration, a union of flesh and crystal, of biological chance and crystalline perfection. They called it the Great Resonance. The captain leaned closer to the camera, a rapturous, terrifying smile on her face. "We have been chosen. We are not being destroyed. We are being elevated. We are the bridge. I have given the order. We are lowering our shields. We are opening our arms to eternity. We go now to join the song." The log cut out, replaced by a blast of static. Kaylin stared at the screen, a cold dread seeping into her bones. This wasn't a tomb. It was a temple, a monument to a first contact that had ended not in war, but in conversion. The silicates hadn't been mindless monsters. They were cosmic evangelists, and the crew of the venture had been their first human converts. As the static cleared, new text began to scroll across the screen, the same archaic code as before, but this time it wasn't a prompt. It was a message, forming letter by letter as if being typed by an unseen hand. It wasn't a recording. It was live. The song was interrupted. It read, "It is incomplete. Your presence has awakened the echo. You carry the spark of the old flesh. Tell us, have you come to finish the song?" The faint, sickly yellow light from the silicate energy conduit outside began to pulse faster, brighter. The low hum of the beacon shifted in pitch, becoming a rising, questioning tone. The Hive-Mother wasn't dead. It had been sleeping, dreaming of its lost converts. And Kaylin and her team had just become the new focus of its ancient, alien religion. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the hull of the venture, a bass note that Kaylin felt in her bones, in the fillings of her teeth. It was the ship, the Hive-Mother, waking from its 70-year slumber. The text on the screen blinked, expectant. Outside, through the fractured view screen, the web of organic cables holding the venture in place began to glow with a more intense, feverish light. "Weaver, pull us out now." Kaylin snapped into the comm, her voice a blade of command cutting through the sudden, rising tension. "Warden, I can't." Weaver's voice came back, strained with alarm. "The breach is sealing. The Hive-Mother is regrowing. Crystalline structures are closing the opening, and I'm reading a massive energy surge building in the core. It's some kind of broadcast array. It's powering up." The song. It wanted to sing again. "Lyra, can you shut down that beacon?" Kaylin demanded, turning from the console. "It's their antenna. The power is channeling through it." Lyra was already at a secondary console, her fingers flying across the panel. "I'm trying, Warden, but the system is locked in a feedback loop with the silicate power source. It's not just a beacon anymore. It's a symbiotic system. If I try a hard shutdown, the power backlash could overload the venture's primary conduits and detonate the whole section. So we're trapped in a bomb that's about to start screaming across the galaxy," Jorix summarized grimly, his heavy rifle aimed at the bridge's only entrance. "And what happens when it does?" when it starts singing its song again. Every silicate remnant in this sector will hear it." Kaylin answered, her mind a cold engine of calculation, stripping away the shock and leaving only the tactical reality. The Concordance will hear it. They'll interpret it as a renewed silicate threat originating from a human source. They won't see a rescue mission. They'll see a provocation, an act of war. They would be the spark that reignited the fire that had almost consumed humanity. The irony was a bitter pill. They had come to honor the dead and had instead stumbled into a trap that could create millions more. The message on the screen typed a new line. "You are the key. Your biology is the missing chord. Join the resonance. Become complete. It's talking to us," breathed Lyra. "It thinks we're here to finish what the venture crew started." "Then we're going to disappoint it," Kaylin said, a hard resolve solidifying in her gut. She turned to her team. "New objective. We are no longer on a recovery mission. This is a targeted demolition. We're not just shutting down the beacon. We're cutting the power at its source. Jorik, Lyra, you're with me. We're going outside. We're going to sever that primary energy conduit." The fourth member of the team, a quiet scout named Silas, looked up. "And me. Warden, you're staying here," Kaylin ordered. "Keep this bridge secure. If that thing tries to communicate again, I want you to find a way to talk back. Stall it. Confuse it. Buy us time. Do not let it know our true intentions." Silas nodded, his face grim but determined. As Kaylin, Lyra, and Jorik made their way back to the airlock, the entire ship shuddered, a deep, grinding tremor. "Warden," Weaver's voice crackled. "The Hive-Mother is reconfiguring. Internal structures are shifting. It's trying to protect the core. It knows it's vulnerable. It just made our job harder." Kaylin muttered. Back outside, floating in the vast core chamber, the change was immediately apparent. The space was no longer static. Crystalline plates shifted and slid into new positions, forming interlocking barriers. Filaments of organic cable writhed like snakes, thickening the web around the venture. The primary conduit they needed to cut was now partially obscured by a newly formed wall of translucent crystal. "It's learning," Lyra said, her voice a mixture of awe and terror. "It's adapting its structure in real time based on our actions. Then we need to be faster than it can think," Kaylin countered. They jetted towards the conduit, a pulsating artery of sickly yellow light as thick as a transport shuttle. Jorik unslung the heavy tool from his back, a thermic lance, a mining tool repurposed for demolition. It was designed to cut through dense asteroid rock. Kaylin hoped it was enough to slice through alien biotechnology. As Jorik braced himself against the hull of the Venture and aimed the lance, the Hive-Mother responded. Tendrils of crystal, sharp as razors, shot out from the surrounding walls, lashing towards them. Kaylin and Lyra opened fire, their plasma bolts shattering the crystalline darts before they could find their mark. "Jorik!" Now Kaylin yelled. Jorik ignited the lance. A brilliant, white-hot beam of energy erupted from its tip, striking the conduit. The alien material hissed and bubbled, resisting the intense heat. It was working, but it was slow. Too slow. More defenses activated. Small. Autonomous drones, like metallic insects with glowing red eyes, emerged from hidden niches in the core wall. They swarmed towards the team, firing tiny, needle-like projectiles. "They're trying to overwhelm us," Lyra shouted, her carbine firing in rapid, controlled bursts. taking down drone after drone. Kaylin focused her fire on the lashing crystal tendrils, a relentless barrage to keep them from skewering Jorik as he worked. The hum from the core was rising in pitch, becoming a piercing, painful whine. On the bridge, Silas watched the alien message scroll across the screen again. The choir gathers. The song must not be silenced. Your resistance is discord. It is pain. Silas, a linguist and cryptographer before the Reclaimed erased his past, saw his chance. Accessing the ship's communication logs, he found the original frequency of the silicate song that Captain Rostova had described. It was a complex waveform, more mathematical equation than sound. He couldn't replicate it, but he could corrupt it. He began typing, inputting a counter frequency, a simple, looping signal of digital noise designed to interfere with the original transmission. He was injecting static into their hymn. He keyed in a message of his own, using the same archaic code. The song is flawed. The old flesh was weak. A new chord is required. We are not the key. We are the judges. For a moment, the scrolling text on the screen stopped. The rising hum from the core faltered, dipping in pitch. The relentless assault on the team outside lessened. As if the Hive-Mother was momentarily confused, its attention divided. It worked. Warden Silas reported over the comm, a hint of triumph in his voice. I've given it something to think about. Keep it thinking. Kaylin grunted, blasting another crystal tendril into dust. Jorik, how much longer? Almost there, he yelled back, sweat beading on his forehead inside his helmet. This stuff is dense as a neutron star. The thermic lance finally broke through the outer layer of the conduit. A shower of golden sparks erupted, and the sickly yellow light within flickered violently. The Hive-Mother seemed to scream, not a sound, but a psychic shockwave of pure agony and rage that slammed into all of them. Kaylin staggered, her vision blurring. Her helmet's audio dampeners shrieked as they tried to compensate for the mental assault. The drones and crystal tendrils renewed their attack with a desperate fury, but they were too late. With a final, agonizing groan, the thermic lance sliced through the last of the conduit. The connection was severed. The pulsating yellow light died, and the entire core chamber was plunged into a deeper darkness, lit only by the strobing flashes of their weapons and the dying red eyes of the drones. The rising hum cut out, replaced by the profound, pressurized silence they had first encountered. They had done it. They had silenced the song. Status report. Kaylin gasped, shaking her head to clear the psychic residue. Conduit is severed. Jorik confirmed, his breathing heavy. We're clear, Lyra added. A moment later, Weaver's voice, a balm of relief, filled their ears. Warden, the energy readings are dropping. The broadcast array is offline, and the breach, the crystalline growth, has stopped. It's becoming inert again. A new message appeared on the bridge screen, the letters forming slowly, painfully, as if written with the last dregs of a dying mind. The song is broken. The echo fades alone. Again, so cold. Then the screen went dark. The Hive-Mother was finally, truly dying. But their own problems were far from over. The breach is still sealed. Warden, Weaver reported, his tone shifting back to professional urgency. I can't get the Charon in to retrieve you. And worse, the Lance's energy discharge and that psychic pulse from the core, it didn't go unnoticed. I'm picking up a Concordance patrol vessel on an intercept course. They're moving fast. ETA is 20 minutes. They were trapped inside a dead alien god, in a forbidden zone, with a Concordance warship coming to ask them questions they couldn't possibly answer. Their clandestine mission was about to become a galactic incident. Kalen looked at the severed conduit, then back at the dark, silent husk of the venture. They had saved humanity from one crisis, only to plunge it headlong into another. She keyed her comm. Silas, get to the venture's engineering bay. I want a full diagnostic on its primary drive core. Find out if 90 years of sitting in an alien's trophy case has left it with one last gasp of life. Warden Silas asked, confused. The Charon is our only way out. Not anymore, Kalen said, her mind already 3 steps ahead, the old, familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. The Concordance is coming for a ghost. We're going to give them one. You want to fly this relic out of here. Yorick's voice, a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration, echoed in Kalen's helmet. They were floating back towards the shattered airlock of the Venture, the beam of Jorik's helmet lamp playing over the ship's 90-year-old, battle-scarred hull. Warden, this isn't a ship. It's a museum piece. And it's been wired into an alien parasite for the better part of a century, which is why Silas is in engineering and not on vacation, Kalen replied, her tone leaving no room for debate. They entered the silent vessel, the sense of violation now replaced by a frantic, calculated urgency. Lyra, get to the bridge. Interface with Weaver. I need a complete tactical overlay of this entire debris field, mapped against the Concordance vessel's approach vector. Find me a shadow big enough to hide a ghost. Jorik, with me. We need to do a structural integrity check. I don't want this thing shaking apart the moment we try to light the engines. The plan was insane. A desperate gambit born from the ashes of their original mission. They would use the Venture itself as their escape vehicle. If the Concordance was coming to investigate a 90-year-old distress beacon, Kalen would give them the source of that beacon. The challenge was turning a fragment of a colony ship, a piece of a tomb, into a functional vessel in under 20 minutes. As she and Yorick moved through the ship's main structural spine, their mag boots clanking on the deck plates, Kalen's mind was a whirlwind of risk assessment. The plan had a sliver of a chance of succeeding, only because of the Concordance's own rigid protocols. Their patrol ships were observers, not aggressors. They would approach, scan, hail, and report. They would not expect their target to suddenly power up and flee. Surprise was their only real weapon. Silas's voice crackled over the comm, strained but hopeful. Warden, I'm in engineering. It's a mess. The silicates didn't just plug into the power grid, they integrated with it. There are crystalline growths on the primary energy regulators, but the drive core itself, it's shielded. It looks clean. The colonists must have initiated a full shutdown before the resonance took them. The fuel rods are cold, but they're intact. Can you bring it online? Kalen asked, the question hanging in the air like a death sentence. A cold start on a core. This old is risky, Silas admitted, but the alternative is riskier. I can bypass the damaged regulators and shunt power directly from the core to the maneuvering thrusters. We won't have shields. We won't have weapons. And we probably won't have inertial dampeners. So the ride is going to be rough. But I think I can make it move. That's all I need to hear, Kalen said. Lyra, what's your status? I've got the overlay. Warden, came the reply from the bridge. The Concordance ship is a Justicar-class patrol cruiser. Fast. heavy sensors, but lightly armed. They're on a standard approach, pinging the area with active scans. They'll have our location pinpointed in 5 minutes. There's a massive debris cloud 300 kilometers from our position, the remains of the Aegis flagship Defiant. If we can get inside that, its radiological signature could mask our escape. A 300-kilometer run through a graveyard with no shields and a 90-year-old engine, Jorik muttered, shaking his head as he ran a diagnostic on a primary support strut. Just another day at the office. The next few minutes were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Under Kalen's calm, precise commands, the team worked with the seamless efficiency of a single organism. On the bridge, Lyra fed targeting data to Silas, plotting the most direct course through the wreckage. In engineering, Silas worked feverishly, splicing cables and rerouting power conduits, his every action a delicate dance with a potentially catastrophic core breach. Kalen and Joris, meanwhile, sealed off compromised sections of the ship, reinforcing bulkheads with emergency welders, trying to ensure the ancient frame could withstand the stress of acceleration. A suddenness of violent jolt shook the entire structure, sending a floating toolkit clattering against a bulkhead. Report, Kalen snapped. They're scanning us, Lyra shouted. Active quantum radar. They're trying to get a detailed image of the interior. They know something is off. Silas. How much longer? Kalen pressed. The final sequence is initiating now. Warden, I'm starting the core ignition. Pray to whatever gods you have left. This is either going to work, or we're going to be a new star. A low, deep thrum began to resonate through the ship, a sound of ancient machinery groaning back to life. The emergency lights flickered, then steadied, burning brighter. On the bridge, consoles that had been dark for nearly a century blinked on, displaying streams of diagnostic data, most of it red with error warnings. We have power, Lyra confirmed, her voice a mix of shock and elation. Maneuvering thrusters are online. Barely. Outside, Weaver's voice came over the comm, urgent and clipped. Concordance vessel is accelerating. They've detected the power-up. They're hailing us on all standard frequencies. Ignore them, Kalen ordered as she and Jorik raced to the bridge. Silas, give me everything you've got. Get us moving. Now. Strapping themselves into the decaying command chairs, they felt the venture lurch, a painful, grinding motion as the ancient thrusters fired for the first time in decades. On the view screen, the interior of the Hive-Mother's core began to recede. They were moving. They were actually moving. They're launching a drone. Weaver reported a single recon unit coming in fast. The small silver concordance drone zipped past them, its optical sensors glowing blue as it scanned the impossible sight of the human ghost ship emerging from the carcass of the silicate behemoth. Let it look, Kalen said, a grim smile touching her lips. Let them have a story to tell. As the venture cleared the Hive-Mother, the full, terrifying majesty of the Kepler belt filled the view screen. They were a tiny wounded fish in a sea of dead leviathans. Course laid in. Warden, Lyra said, her hands dancing over the navigation controls. Engaging main thrusters on your mark. Engage, Kalen said simply. The acceleration was brutal. Without inertial dampeners, the full force of the thrust slammed them back into their seats, a crushing weight that stole their breath. The old ship groaned in protest, metal screaming under the strain. Red alerts flashed across every console. It felt like the ship was being torn apart around them. But it was flying. They shot through the debris field, a ghost ship running from its own legend. On their tactical display, they could see the Concordance cruiser changing course, trying to intercept. But they had the head start, and their path through the densest part of the wreckage was too hazardous for the larger ship to follow at speed. They were a mouse running through a briar patch, and the cat was too big to follow. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Alarms blared. A conduit ruptured in the corridor behind them, venting streams of frozen atmosphere. Jorik, ever the pragmatist, sealed the bridge hatch with his welder. They were alive, but they were trapped on a dying ship that was also their only lifeboat. Finally, Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. We're inside the Defiance wreckage cloud. The radiation is off the charts. They won't be able to get a clean sensor lock on us in here. Kaylin allowed herself a single, sharp exhale of relief. Phase 1 of her impossible plan was complete. They were hidden, for now. Weaver, she said, her voice hoarse. Status of the Karen standing by. Warden, just outside the cloud. The Concordance cruiser is holding its position, scanning the wreckage. They're confused. They seem to be debating whether to risk entering the high radiation zone. They won't, Kaylin predicted. Protocol forbids it without a direct order from their high command. They'll observe and report, which gives us a window. Her new plan took shape with lightning speed. Weaver, bring the Karen in. Deep stealth. Find us. We're going to abandon this wreck and make a run for it. Warden, the Venture's drive core is still hot. Silas warned from engineering. Even after shutdown, its energy signature will be detectable for hours. If we abandon it, they'll eventually send in a drone and find it empty. They'll know we were here. They'll know we escaped. Kaylin looked at the tactical display, at the glowing icon of the Concordance cruiser, a predator waiting patiently outside their hiding place. She thought of the vault, of the harrowing doctrine, of the secret she was sworn to protect. Humanity's last resort could not be compromised. An empty ship was evidence. A mystery was a weapon. They won't find it empty, she said, her voice dropping to a low, cold register. Jorik, how much explosive ordnance did we bring on this little field trip? Jorik's helmet tilted in understanding. Standard demolition charges. Enough to collapse a tunnel or breach a bunker. Not enough to vaporize a whole ship. We don't need to vaporize it, Kaylin said, her eyes fixed on the power readings from the Venture's ancient, unstable drive core. We just need to give it a little push. She turned to Silas. Silas, can you rig the core to overload on a remote trigger? There was a moment of silence from engineering, then a slow, dawning realization in Silas's voice. Yes, Warden, I can. It would be an extinction-level event for this entire sector of the belt. Exactly, Kaylin said. The Concordance came here looking for a ghost. They're about to find out that some ghosts still bite back. The plan was no longer just about escape. It was about erasure. They would not only disappear, they would sanitize the scene of their crime with the fire of a dying star, leaving the Concordance with nothing but a black box full of questions and a brand new reason to fear the darkness at the edge of their maps. The rendezvous was a whisper in a hurricane. Weaver piloted the Charon into the radioactive heart of the Defiance wreckage with a surgeon's precision. The stealth ship was a black knife sliding through a storm of swirling metal and lethal energy, its hull shimmering as the stealth field fought against the intense radiation. It docked with the Venture's emergency airlock. the magnetic clamps engaging with a soft thud that was swallowed by the groans of the dying colony ship. Kalen oversaw the transfer, a swift, silent extraction. Jorik and Lyra went first, carrying their gear. Silas was the last of the team to cross, his face pale inside his helmet. He had just finished rigging the Venture's drive core to a remote detonator, a task he'd described as trying to disarm a god's time bomb while building a new trigger for it. He gave Kalen a grim nod as he passed. It's primed. Warden, once you send the signal, there's no kill switch. The feedback loop will be instantaneous. Kalen was the last to leave. Before she stepped across the docking collar, she paused in the Venture's airlock, her gloved hand resting on the cold, ancient metal. For a moment, she thought of Captain Rostova and her crew, of their strange, ecstatic apocalypse, of the song they had so willingly joined. They had come to the stars seeking a new beginning and had found an end so alien it defied comprehension. This ship was their tomb, their temple, and now, their pyre. She felt a pang of something that was almost reverence for the history she was about to erase. It was a necessary sacrilege, stepping into the familiar, sterile interior of the Karen. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease by a fraction. She sealed the outer hatch, and the stealth ship disengaged, melting back into the swirling debris. On the bridge, Weaver had a tactical display on the main screen. The Concordance cruiser was still holding its position. A patient predator, but a new icon had appeared. They've launched their drone again. Warden, Weaver reported. It's entering the cloud, moving cautiously. They're coming to take a closer look. Let them, Kalen said, taking her command chair. Her face was illuminated by the soft glow of the console in front of her. On it was a single, crimson icon labeled Initiate Omega. Take us to the edge of the cloud, just far enough to have a clear FTL jump vector, but keep the Defiance mass between us and them. I want front row seats for the finale. The Quran moved like a phantom, its silent drive leaving no wake. The minutes ticked by, each one a lifetime. On the view screen, they saw the tiny Concordance drone navigate the debris, its searchlights cutting pathetic little swaths through the epic darkness. It grew closer and closer to the derelict Venture. It's reached the ship, Lyra announced, monitoring the drone's telemetry. It's beginning its external scan now. They'll know it's empty in moments. Kalen watched, her expression unreadable. She let the drone complete a full circle around the silent vessel. She let the Concordance observers on their pristine bridge see the truth that the ghost ship was a hollow shell. She wanted them to have that single, baffling moment of discovery. The instant their certainty turned to confusion. She wanted that confusion to be the last thing they felt before the end. The drone stopped, hovering near the bridge, its scanner focused on the empty command chairs within. They know, Weaver said, his voice low. Their ship is powering weapons. It's a precautionary measure, but they're spooked. Good, Kalen said softly. Her thumb hovered over the console. She thought of New Avalon, of the glassed cities and the silent dead. She thought of the vault, of the terrible promise she was sworn to uphold. She thought of the rust, the slow decay of lies and broken treaties. This was not vengeance. It was a statement, written in the language of cosmic fire. It was a period at the end of a sentence that humanity had been trying to write for 70 years. She pressed the icon. For a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then, from the heart of the Venture, a light bloomed. Not an explosion, but an unraveling. A silent, incandescent sphere of pure energy that expanded with impossible speed. The ship, the drone, the debris for kilometers around it were not blown apart. They were consumed, erased from existence in a flash of white that was brighter than a sun. The shockwave that followed was not of force, but of reality itself bending. Space warped. The Quran's alarm screamed as the ship was buffeted by a gravitational tide. On the view screen, the Concordance cruiser, caught at the edge of the blast, was tossed like a leaf in a storm, its shields flaring violently before its systems overloaded and went dark. It was crippled, adrift, its crew alive but blinded and deafened, left with nothing but the ghost of a star burned onto their retinas. The Defiant's massive wreckage cloud, the tomb of humanity's greatest warship, was simply gone, vaporized. A vast, clean sphere of empty space was all that remained, silent and sterile. "Jump," Kaelin ordered, her voice quiet but absolute. The Karen's FTL drive engaged, and the stars outside streaked into lines of blue and white. They were gone, leaving behind a new, man-made nebula and a mystery that would haunt the Concordance for generations. The journey back to Aegis Station was as silent as the one that had brought them. There was no celebration, no relief. They had survived. But the weight of what they had done settled upon them all. They had invoked the spirit of the Scouring, unleashing a weapon of absolute destruction to protect a secret. They had become a reflection of the very thing humanity had fought to overcome. When they docked, Kaelin disembarked alone. She walked the cold, sterile corridors back to the vault, the silence of her footsteps the only sound. She dismissed the Reclaimed, their mission complete, their identities once again relegated to the shadows. In the council chamber, High Elder Theron and the others were waiting. The news of the unexplained energy event in the Kepler belt had already reached them, a sanitized, baffling report from the crippled Concordance cruiser. They looked at her with a new kind of fear and a grudging respect. "Warden," Theron began, his voice hesitant. "What happened?" Kaelin stopped in the center of the floor. She looked at their soft, political faces, at the men and women who debated and appeased, who traded sovereignty for safety. "The venture was found," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "It was structurally unsound. Its drive core went critical. A tragedy. All hands lost." It was the official story, a clean, simple lie to cover a messy, complicated truth. She knew they didn't believe it, not entirely, but they would accept it, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. She was their monster in the dark, the sin they needed to survive. She turned and left them to their deliberations, returning to the one place that felt like home, the observation deck overlooking the Seraphina Nebula. She stood in the starlight, a solitary figure watching the slow, majestic dance of creation. The rust was still there, in the quiet hum of the station, in the memory of the light she had unleashed. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than the weight of her duty. She had looked into the heart of an alien god and the ghost of humanity's past, and she had chosen her own path. She had not joined the song, nor had she allowed her own people's fear to dictate her actions. She had held the line. The galaxy was not safer today than it had been yesterday. The Concordance was wounded and suspicious. The secrets of the vault were secure, But the price of that security had been brutally high. But as Kaylin watched the stars, she understood. Peace was not a destination. It was not an armistice signed in a gilded hall. It was a constant, vigilant struggle against the rust. It was the Warden's watch, a lonely vigil in the dark, and her watch had just begun.